Hi guys! Have you ever wondered how to make your application travel in time? Or maybe you have a problem with managing time in unit test, integration test, or end-to-end testing. If you have, then let me say that's great you found this video when I will be showing in a real examples the time management in all three test layers. Okay, at first, let's think for a moment how we can test our application's behavior in different points of time. The most obvious approach is just to wait for the time to pass by. But it's not the best solution, and I hope that I don't have to explain it why. The second solution is to modify the operating system clock. But it's not a good idea because it can break your operating system. The third solution is targeted toward the application that the source code cannot be modified. And this solution requires AspectJ and bytecode modification, and it won't be covered in this tutorial. And finally, the last solution, I think it's quite simple, but it works well. It is to replace all of getting time invocation by invoking a custom datetime provider methods. It's targeted to the application that you have full control over. So let's get started as we have a lot to cover today. Okay, at first I'm gonna create a sample application. Sample SpringBoot application. So let's open SpringBoot initializer and let's change group name to com.bettercoding.com time traveling. Let's call the artifact time traveling demo project for time off, let's say off time traveling SpringBoot application. Okay, I'm gonna use Java 17 and I'm gonna add two more dependencies. The first one is Lombok, and because I'm gonna expose some REST services, I need Spring Web dependency. Okay, so let's generate the project. Let's open it, and I'm gonna copy it to my Java folder, and now I can open it using IntelliJ IDEA. Time traveling demo. Okay, let's run the application at first to be sure that everything was generated correctly and everything is configured correctly. Okay, let's enable Lombok annotation processing. Okay, so everything works. So now we are ready to prepare sample application. It will be very simple application. I'm gonna create a bin component called Big Ben, which will be responsible for returning a current time in application. So let's create a component called Big Ben. Let's mark it as a component. And let's expose method public zone datetime get application time, and let's return zone datetime dot now. Okay, that's our bin. Now I'm gonna create a REST controller. Let's call it time controller. And this is the, let's mark it as a REST controller with request mapping /time, and I'm gonna auto-wire the Big Ben here. I prefer auto-wiring by constructors, so that's why I'm making private final variables and of fields, and then I just annotated it like using required args constructor, which allows me to inject those bins through constructor instead of using auto-wire on field. Okay, so let's create a public zoned date time method, get current time, and let's return Big Ben dot get application time. Let's mark it as a get mapping. Yeah, that's all. That's our sample application. Let's test it. Okay. I'm gonna open localhost port 8080/time/. As you can see, the time returned by the Big Ben is the same as my system time. Okay, now we are going to the second part, which is when I talk about how you can manage time in unit tests. So let's create a simple unit test first. Let's call it a time, okay, Big Ben time traveling unit test. Okay, let's create the method, the test method. Void time traveling test given when then. Okay, so I would like to have a Big Ben instance. And I would like to have some expected time equals, let's say, zone dead time dose dot parse. Yeah, so I have some expected time that I would like to get back to. Yeah, I have a Big Ben instance, and when I call BigBen.get application time, then I would like to have equals that my application time is equal to expected time. Of course, when I run the application, when I run the test, it fails, but not because of let me see what's the problem. 1901 to 11. oh, sorry, here. Yeah, that was my false. Yeah, it fails, but because the current time is 2022, but we expect 1990. So yeah, so we are ready to make some changes. So the idea behind the time traveling is to have a custom data provider which provides the method, for example, time now, and then we would like to replace all of the invocations of getting time, like for example local datetime.now or zoned datetime.now or new date. We would like to replace all of them by invoking this our custom provider. So let's create our custom provider first. And so I would like to create a date time provider. But I would like to create it as a singleton. So the easiest thread-safe pattern to create a singleton in Java is to use enum class. So yeah, I'm gonna create an enum. Okay, so get instance. I'm gonna return instance. Oh, sorry, public static datetime provider. Get instance, return instance. Okay, and now we can focus on the. We have implemented singleton pattern, so now we can focus on the real datetime provider content. So I would like to have a clock, private clock. I would like to have also a default clock. And I would like to expose two methods. The first one is time now. And I would like to return the time now as zoned datetime.now. And as you can see, I can pass the clock. So when I pass clock, my custom clock, here I could be able to change the time. So that's the method time now, responsible for returning current time. Now let's create another method called public void set time. Okay, I can pass zone date time here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set our clock to clock.fixed zone date time to instance, so date time dot get zone. Okay, and I would like to have the third method, which is reset time. And to reset time, what I have to do is just to set our clock to saved default clock. Okay, I can have one more method here. set time with a clock parameter. And I can yes, and I can refactor the code here. Yes. I decided to add one more method, I mean set time with clock, because in some cases you may want to pass clock instead of setting a fixed time, like in this method. For the tutorial purposes, we use only this one, but I would like you to know that it's also possible to pass clock, which don't have to be, which doesn't have to be fixed clock. Okay, so we have, as you can see, we have a datetime provider implemented as a singleton. So now it's time to change our application code to use this datetime provider instead of returning zoned datetime.now. As I told you, now we should replace all of the getting time invocations like this, or like new date, yes, like this one, old new date method, yes, or local datetime.now. All of those invocations we should replace now by calling datetime provider get instance time now. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna auto-wire bin datetime provider here. I haven't registered it yet, but I'm gonna do it later. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna create a private field datetime provider. I'm gonna create a required args constructor to be able to inject datetime provider via constructor instead of using auto-wired annotation. And as I told you, I have to replace zone datetime now by calling datetime provider dot time now. Okay. Now we have to fix our unit test because we have to pass datetime provider to Big Ben constructor. We can use it datetime provider dot get instance here. Okay, it's almost done, but now I'm gonna show you how you can manage time in unit test. So you can create two methods. The first one is setup, which is called before all of the tests in class, and you can create another method called cleanup, which will be called after all of the tests in the class. So let's create them. So before void setup, setup. Okay, and after all, static void cleanup. Okay, those methods have to be public, static, sorry. Okay, and to change the time, we have to call dateTimeProvider dot get instance dot set time, and I'm gonna copy this zoned date time, or maybe custom application time. Yeah, I'm gonna set custom time, and in the cleanup method we have to remember to clean up our application, to clean up datetime provider. So we have to call datetime provider dot get instance dot reset time. That's all. So let's test our application. Yeah, as you can see, everything works perfect. To prove it, I can change, for example, the time to 1991, which should makes our test fail. And as you can see, that's what's happened. Okay, now let's go to the next part. I'm gonna show you how you can manage the time in integration tests. So let's create some integration tests. I'm gonna use the class that was delivered by Spring Initializer. There is already there has been already one test written, context load. I'm gonna add one more here. So let's call it time travel 2. Time travel test. And as in previous example, we have the given section, when, and then section. This test will be almost the same with only one difference. Okay, so given, let's say, expected time and my Big Ben instance, but this time I would like to auto-wire Big Ben class here, because I'm gonna test Big Ben class or Big Ben component, maybe that's better. Okay, so I'm gonna auto-wire a Big Ben component here, and when I call BigBen.getApplicationTime, I would like to have application time equals expected time. Okay, that's our test. Okay, let's try to run our test first. Okay, as you may expect, our application context doesn't load because, as you can see, there is no qualifying bin of type datetime provider available. So we have to register our datetime provider. I used singleton pattern by using enum class, but in your case you could use standard Java class, and you will be able to annotate it via component annotation. But it's very important not to annotate our datetime provider as a component, because we would like to, because when we will annotate a datetime provider as a component, what Spring does is is he creates another instance of datetime provider instead of use our singleton instance. So it's very important to prepare a time configuration class, let's say, configuration class. Let's mark it as a configuration, and let's register bin datetime provider, and instead of returning new datetime provider here, we would like to return datetime provider get instance. Okay, and now when we run the test, of course the context should load, but that our second test should still failed. Okay, as you can see, there is some null pointer exception of clock, and let me check here. Oh, okay, yeah, I made one big mistake here, which is clock is equals default clock. Okay, that's the mistake. Okay, let's run it. Yeah, as you can see, expected time is 1990, but actual time is 2022. Okay, so let's go back to our test, and to manage the time in SpringBoot test, that was the idea, to manage the time in the same way like we already done in unit tests. So we can create two methods, setup and cleanup, and we can just set time in setup method and cleanup and reset time in cleanup method. Okay, let's run the test, and as you can see, everything works like a charm. So yeah, maybe let's do some refactor here. Okay, let's try it one more time. Yes, everything works perfect. Okay, now it's time to talk about end-to-end testing. End-to-end tests are usually performed on some environment where you have many applications. And what we can achieve is we would like to move all of those applications in some point of the time. So we usually have another application, for example, responsible for performing tests, which performs some REST calls, for example, to our application that change the time inside the application. So yeah, to achieve this behavior, we can just expose another REST controller. Let's call it time management controller. Let's mark it as a REST controller. Request mapping / time management. Okay, and let's add requires args constructor too. and I would like to inject datetime provider here. And I would like to expose two methods here. The first one will be responsible for changing time, so public void change application time. Sorry, change application time, and I would like to pass change application time request. Okay, change application time request. Okay, and I'm gonna create inner class. Okay, I'm gonna pass zoned date time, and what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna call this date time provider dot set time, and I'm gonna pass the value that I received from the request. Okay, let's mark it as a post mapping, and let's mark it as a request body. Okay, and the second method, I would like to create another method responsible for resetting our datetime provider. Okay, so let's create a delete mapping and public void reset application time, and I'm gonna call this datetime provider dot reset time. Okay, it's time to test our application's behavior. So yeah, let's run our application. As you can see, when I call our time service, I got the time the same as my system time. So now let's try to call time management and change the time, for example, to 2011. So let's try to do this. Yeah, I got 200. Okay. And when I refresh the time, yeah, I got 2011. So everything works perfect. One more thing, let's try to call delete on time management endpoint, time management resource, not endpoint, and when I refresh the page, I should get my system time. Yeah, so everything works perfect. So the last thing to do is that we don't want to expose this controller, for example, on production environment. So we would like to expose it only on test environments or only on some chosen environments. So what we can do is we can annotate our time management controller with conditional on property, and we can use, for example, prefix time management and name enabled, having value true, and we can edit our application properties. I'm gonna change it into YAML because it's more convenient for me. Okay, and I'm gonna create a property here, time management dot enabled true. Okay, let's run the application again. Let's try to change the time. Okay, 404 not found. So okay, as you can see, I made a typo here. So let's rerun the application. Let's try to set the time. Yeah, we got 200. Okay. And for example, if you want to disable time management feature on some environment, just change it this parameter to false, for example. And let's restart the application. And now we shouldn't be able to change the time. Yeah, we got 404 time management not found. Okay, to summarize, first we went through some ideas how we can test our application's behavior in different point of time. Then we implemented data provider as a singleton, which allows us to use it in unit tests. Later on, we registered this singleton as a Spring Bean that allows us to use the same time management approach in both unit testing and integration testing. Finally, we exposed time management API as a REST service, which allows us to modify the application's time externally, used in end-to-end testing. So guys, this is the end of the tutorial. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up and let me know what do you think about it in comments. If you don't want to miss any of my future videos, then please subscribe to my channel. And as always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you in my next videos. See ya!